Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
She laughed in my face when I asked her where she was going. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused her of anything. I just looked up from the kitchen counter where I was going through our online budget and said, "Hey, didn't we talk about maybe staying in tonight? We've barely spent time together all week." Her eyes didn't even flicker. She kept swiping her lipstick on, slow and smooth in the reflection of her phone screen, like I hadn't said anything that required her attention. And then, with a quick pop of her lips, she finally glanced at me and said it. "I don't need your permission, remember?" She grinned. "We're married, not in a dictatorship." Then came the laugh, short, sharp, amused. Like I was some sad little man with a clipboard and a curfew bell. That laugh stuck with me more than the words. She left 10 minutes later in a black wrap dress I'd never seen before. I don't know if it was new or if she'd just hidden it from me. It didn't matter. She was out the door, car pulling down the driveway, tail lights disappearing into the night. I didn't follow her. I didn't call. I just sat there in the kitchen, the light over the stove flickering every few seconds, a draft moving through the house like it belonged there more than I did. That was the moment something shifted. Because the truth is, I hadn't asked her for permission either. I'd asked for honesty. I'd asked for a small piece of her attention, her time. I'd asked for respect. And she laughed. That's what finally did it. See, people always imagine these things happen in some big dramatic scene. Someone screaming, throwing plates, confessing under pressure. But it's usually quiet. It's usually just one laugh at the wrong time. One glance that lingers too long in a mirror. One smirk that confirms everything you've been trying to deny. And the worst part? That wasn't even our first argument this week. It was just the most revealing. 3 nights earlier, she'd come home at 1:30 in the morning, claiming she stayed to help her friend Haley sort out her breakup. She'd kicked off her heels like they were shackles, poured herself a glass of wine, and didn't bother explaining anything unless I asked directly. When I did, she rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd leave the room backwards. Another night, she told me she was going to a work dinner, but her boss had already invited me to the same event 3 days earlier, and she wasn't on the guest list. I didn't confront her about that. I didn't ask where she really was, because part of me didn't want to hear another lie delivered with that same tone of breezy contempt. But tonight hit differently. The laugh did something to me. I looked around the kitchen, at the cold leftovers in the fridge I'd been planning to reheat and eat with her, the bottle of wine I'd bought to surprise her, not for an occasion, just because I missed how we used to sit and talk about nothing. I thought about how many nights I'd waited, excused, pretended not to care. I wasn't going to do that anymore. She didn't need my permission? Fine. Then maybe I didn't need her in my life either. And that wasn't some petty reaction. It was clarity. Cold, quiet clarity. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank account. It was worse than I expected. She'd withdrawn $400 3 days ago from a checking account we'd agreed was for bills only. 2 weeks earlier, $600 at a boutique I'd never heard of. And then there was the $1,200 charge to a resort 2 towns over, labeled spa services. No mention of any spa trip. No mention of the boutique. The only new thing I'd seen was the dress she walked out in tonight. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there in our bed staring at the ceiling while the moonlight crept across the wall. I didn't check my phone. I didn't even try to call her. I was past trying. But I wasn't done. Something was building. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just resolve. If she thought she could laugh her way through this, she was about to learn what happened when the man she thought would never leave decided to start packing quietly, thoroughly, and permanently. Because if she didn't need me in control, she wasn't going to get me in her corner either. And she never expected what would happen next. It's strange how quickly detachment can feel natural once you stop begging to matter. The morning after her laugh echoed through the house, she came back home around 8 a.m., with a smug little yawn and sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown. She didn't even sneak in. Just dropped her purse, kicked off her shoes, and headed straight to the bathroom. No apology. No explanation. Not even a lie. She didn't ask if I slept well. Didn't notice I hadn't. Or that I'd been up all night reviewing 6 months of statements from our bank accounts and credit cards. She emerged from the shower humming. And just like that, we were supposed to pretend nothing had happened. Like she hadn't left a husband and a home behind to chase, whatever it was she thought was worth it. I made breakfast like I normally did. Eggs, toast, coffee. She scrolled her phone and replied to messages while picking at her food, never looking up. Somewhere between her 3rd scroll and 4th sip, she said, "You're quiet this morning." I just nodded. Didn't sleep well. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'm sure you'll feel better after work," like it was a cold and not a chasm widening between us. And here's the thing, her detachment used to hurt. Now it just confirmed everything I needed to know. That afternoon, I went to the tech aisle at Target. Bought a slim voice recorder. One of those button-sized ones that could stick under a car seat or behind a visor. I wasn't even angry while doing it. I was calm, focused. That night, I asked her if she wanted to watch a movie. She said she was too tired from work. 2 hours later, she said she was going out for a drive to clear her head. Right. I waited 5 minutes, then slipped outside and placed the recorder under her dashboard. It felt like betrayal. But then I remembered that laugh. And suddenly, it felt like survival. She came home past midnight again. Said nothing. Climbed into bed and faced the wall. I didn't speak either. Just closed my eyes and pictured the bank login screen in my head, remembering the booking confirmation I saw for KLM events, private suite reservation, Sunday 6 p.m. She'd said she was going to Haley's birthday dinner that night. Funny, since I ran into Haley's husband at Home Depot earlier that day. He mentioned they were hosting Haley's parents for dinner at home. No big party. Just family. The pieces weren't just clicking into place, they were practically throwing themselves at me. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I just started watching everything. Listening. I noticed how she kept her phone face down every time she sat it on the table. How her notifications were always on silent. How she started locking the bathroom door during her showers and bringing her phone in with her. She laughed more on her phone than she did with me. Whole conversations happening with someone I couldn't see. Or maybe someone she thought I never would. I started checking her car before she left. Empty seats, clean dash, always immaculate. Too immaculate. Like it had been wiped down. Like someone who had something to hide was making sure no trace was left behind. She made a mistake the following Wednesday. Said she was going to a late team meeting at the office. But I called the main line an hour later and asked to speak to her directly, pretending to be a client who forgot his rep's extension. She left about 45 minutes ago, the receptionist said, chipper as ever. I didn't say a word when she got home. Just handed her a cup of tea, asked how the meeting went. She said it was long and boring, same as always. I smiled and nodded. Yeah, sounds about right. That night, I retrieved the recorder. I sat in the garage with the engine off and the player in my hand, listening to her voice. Listening to a man I didn't recognize telling her how good she looked in black. Her saying, "You're bad," with that same laugh I'd heard in the kitchen a week earlier. There were jokes. Flirting. A conversation about a place they'd been last Thursday, while I was home watching the dinner I'd cooked go cold. She said my name once. Laughed about how I still thinks I don't notice when he's snooping. He laughed too. She said, he won't do anything. He's too proud. He just wants peace. Maybe that was true once, but not anymore. There's a particular kind of silence that settles when your worst suspicion isn't just confirmed, it's outdone. I thought I knew what I'd find on the recorder. A few flirtatious conversations, maybe plans to meet, laughter that didn't belong to me anymore. But that wasn't what hit the hardest. What hit me was the voice on the other end of the flirtation. It was someone I knew, not a stranger, not some faceless coworker. It was Derek. Derek, the guy I used to go fishing with. The guy who sat in our backyard 3 months ago drinking my beer and giving me marriage advice. The same guy who helped me fix a broken window in the garage while my wife brought us lemonade like it was a summer day in a Norman Rockwell painting. I paused the recording, stared at the wall in the garage. I'd had dinner with him. We'd played cards. Talked about our dads. He'd come to our wedding. And now he was in my wife's car whispering about how hot she looked when she argued with me. My hands didn't shake. I just hit play again. She laughed and said, he still thinks I'm spending Sunday with Haley. I told him she's having a spa day for her birthday. Derek, he doesn't suspect anything? Her. Please. He's too proud to ask, too scared to push. That last part stuck. I realized that's how she saw me. Proud. Scared. Safe. She thought I'd do what I always did, back down. Make excuses. Play dumb. Pretend not to see it. But I wasn't pretending anymore. I went back inside and watched her sleep. Peaceful, like someone with no weight on her conscience. Like someone whose worst-case scenario involved an awkward conversation and a brief cool-down period. Someone who believed she was untouchable. I waited a full day before taking my next step. I wanted to see if she'd even mention Derek. Drop his name. Slip up. She didn't. Instead, she texted me that she might stay overnight at Haley's house again this coming weekend. Girls' weekend, she said, complete with manicures, wine, and catching up. I didn't even respond. Just hit save on the screenshot and forwarded it to myself with the subject line, "Her lie, Exhibit B." Then I called Haley. Not to accuse. Not to confront. Just to ask one simple question. "Hey, just checking, are you and my wife still doing that spa weekend you mentioned a while back?" She paused. I'm not sure what you mean." "The one this Saturday. She said you booked something for your birthday." A longer pause. "I didn't plan anything. I'm actually going to see my sister in Vermont. She's due in a couple weeks." There it was. Casual confirmation. No malice, no manipulation. Just the truth. And the truth burned far less than the lie ever could. That night, while she showered, I went through her purse. Found the second phone. No passcode. Inside, there were messages, long threads of them. Not just with Derek. With two other men. One of them she called Benji, and I didn't even know a Benji existed. But he apparently knew what color underwear she liked. I didn't stop reading. I couldn't. The worst part wasn't the sexting, or the hotel bookings, or even the photos she sent. It was what she said about me. One message to Derek read, "He's not a man, Derek. He's a routine. A paycheck. He doesn't make me feel anything anymore." Routine. Paycheck. I wasn't a husband. I was a direct deposit. I went cold then. Not angry, just clear. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was uninterested. She decided I was disposable and just hadn't gotten around to telling me. Fine. I could work with that. I started backing up every message. Every photo. Every receipt. I took pictures of the phone screen, forwarded emails to a new folder, saved audio files to a password-protected drive. I wasn't planning to use any of it in court. That wasn't the point. This was for me. So that one day, if I ever doubted whether I made the right choice walking away, I could remind myself. She said I was too proud to ask questions. She said I was too scared to find the truth. But she was about to find out what happens when the man you underestimate decides to stop being predictable. And what comes next? She'll never see it coming. I didn't speak a word about what I knew. Not to her. Not to Derek. Not even to my closest friends. I wanted silence. I wanted her to stay comfortable, to feel untouchable just a little while longer. Because once the mask slips, there's no putting it back on. And I needed her completely unaware for this next part. That week, I started preparing like it was a business exit strategy. First, I contacted an attorney, quietly, using a workday lunch break. Explained the situation, laid out the documentation I had. Voice recordings. Screenshots. Expense history. Secondary phone. The lawyer's eyes widened about halfway through the folder. "You've done your homework," she said. "Want to take her to court?" I shook my head. I don't want vengeance. I want separation. Fast, clean, irreversible. We drew up papers. Filed under no fault for speed. But I had the evidence if I needed leverage on spousal support, property, or reputation. She wasn't just reckless. She was entitled. And entitled people don't brace for consequences, they brace for attention. Next, I called my bank and separated our accounts. I redirected my direct deposit to a private savings account. I froze the joint card she'd been using for groceries and work events that actually led to boutique purchases and five-star dinners with people who weren't me. She noticed within 48 hours. "Babe," she said, leaning against the doorframe one evening, holding her phone, "the card declined at brunch today. Some glitch." I didn't look up from my laptop. "I'll check with the bank tomorrow. Could be fraud protection." She shrugged. "Okay. Can you just send me money for now? I've got stuff to order." I nodded. "Sure." And I didn't. Instead, I spent that night drafting an email. It went out to a very specific list of people, her boss, Derek's wife, and a friend of ours who used to brag about knowing everyone in town. I didn't attach the evidence. I didn't have to. I just wrote. "You might want to keep an eye on your people. Some boundaries are being crossed in plain sight." I knew curiosity would do the rest. 2 days later, Derek texted me. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. He followed it up with, "It wasn't supposed to go that far. She said you two were already basically done." That one made me laugh. He wasn't apologizing. He was trying to rationalize. Trying to cushion the fallout he must have seen coming. That night, my wife came home uncharacteristically early. Her face was tight. Tired. The kind of tired that comes from holding up too many lies and watching one of them slip loose. "You okay?" I asked casually. She hesitated. "I've just had a weird day. Derek's acting like a child. His wife apparently found something and went nuts." I nodded. Well, what do you think she found? She narrowed her eyes a little. I don't know. Maybe texts? Probably jealous. I sipped my tea. Jealous of what? She smiled faintly, like she thought I was flirting. Some people just want to blame someone for their own boring lives. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about her boredom anymore. It was about accountability. And she didn't even realize the walls were already closing in. That Friday, she packed a small overnight bag. I didn't ask why. She offered the excuse anyway. Spa retreat with Haley, she said, like she was reading off a script. Sounds nice, I replied. Enjoy yourself. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Like she didn't know Haley was halfway to Vermont and had no clue her name was being used as an alibi. The moment the door clicked shut, I got to work. Within an hour, the divorce packet was placed in a priority envelope, time-stamped, and overnight to her spa retreat hotel. Not to her home. Not to her email. Not even to her office. I wanted her to get it in the one place she thought she was safest, in a robe, on crisp white sheets, basking in the afterglow of her fantasy life. A man at peace had mailed her the end of her comfort. And that wasn't all. I'd scheduled movers for Monday. Half the furniture? Gone. Bank account? Secured. Utilities? Transferred. Lease? Broken under the infidelity clause she forgot existed when we signed it. She was going to come home to a house that felt nothing like hers. Because it wasn't anymore. Not once during any of it did I raise my voice. Not once did I throw her phone at a wall or yell through tears or ask her why. She said she didn't need my permission. She was about to learn I didn't need her in my future. And the final part? It wasn't just paperwork. It was the day she came home and found out what losing someone who kept you grounded really looked like. She walked in like nothing had changed. Still in that same beige trench coat she wore when she wanted to feel expensive, her overnight bag hanging off one shoulder. Hair in loose curls. Sunglasses on top of her head, even though the sun had been down for an hour. There was a bounce in her step, like she had a secret. And she did. But so did I. She stepped inside, and that's when she hesitated. It hit her instantly. Something was off. Furniture gone. Couch missing. A few walls bare. No hum from the fridge, because the fridge, like half the kitchen, had already been moved into storage. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She turned and looked at me. I was sitting on the single chair left in the living room, sipping coffee. "Where's everything?" she finally asked. I took a breath, not because I needed to, but because I wanted the moment to last just a second longer. "Gone," I said calmly. "Half of everything, technically." She blinked. "What?" I nodded toward the envelope sitting on the counter. "Your copy of the divorce papers is in there. Though I assume the hotel already gave you the first set." She didn't move. Didn't even try to touch it. "You're joking," she said flatly. "No," I said. "You are. Or were. For the last few months. But I'm done laughing." That broke the stillness. She dropped her bag. "Wait a minute. This is ridiculous. You're really doing this because I didn't ask your permission to go out." There it was again, that word. Permission. I stood up. "No. I'm doing this because you used girls' weekends as covers to sleep with 3 different men. Because you spent thousands from our account on hotel rooms, spa lies, and lingerie you never wore around me. Because you mocked me to them. And because you thought I wouldn't do anything." Her mouth opened. Closed. She looked pale now. How do you even know?" I stepped closer. Still calm. "Because I stopped trusting your words and started watching your patterns. Because I trusted myself." She grabbed for her phone, like it could somehow save her. "Don't bother," I said. "I've already backed everything up. And no, I didn't send it to anyone else. Not your family. Not your job. Not even Derek's wife. I don't need revenge. I needed closure." Her voice broke a little. "We can talk about this." I smiled then, not with warmth, but with finality. "We already did. Every time I asked you what was wrong. Every time I asked where you were going. Every time I begged to feel like a husband instead of a placeholder." She shook her head like she couldn't believe it. Like this was a scene playing out for someone else. "Derek said you'd never leave," she whispered. I almost laughed. "Of course he did." "Then I guess you'll have to tell him he was wrong," I said. "Assuming he's still taking your calls." Her eyes snapped up. "What do you mean?" I nodded toward her phone. "You might want to check your messages." Because earlier that day, I'd sent Derek a copy of the hotel bill, his name used on the reservation she thought I wouldn't see. And I'd CC'd his wife. Not to ruin his life. Just to balance the scales. She looked like someone trying to remember how to breathe. I walked past her and toward the door. "You have 30 days to vacate." I gave you the full legal grace period. After that, the locks change. Utilities are already in my name, and you'll find your name off every account you abused. Where are you going? She asked, voice cracking. Somewhere honest, I said, not looking back. I heard her crying behind me, but it didn't move me. Not because I was cruel, but because I'd already mourned her long before the first lie. Long before Derek. Long before that laugh in the kitchen that told me exactly how small she thought I was. I'd given her every opportunity to be different. She'd given me every reason to walk away. And in the end, she was right. She didn't need my permission, but I didn't need her in my life either. And now, she knew what that really meant.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.